A.E. Simon once remarked, "Liberty is not something a government gives you. It is a right that no government can legally take away." It is because I agree with him that I negate the resolution. The United States has a moral obligation to adopt a single-payer healthcare system. The resolution questions whether the U.S. government has a certain moral obligation, therefore I value morality. The only moral obligation a government has is to respect the autonomy of its citizens. Citizens consent to live under the authority of the government with their own autonomy, so for the government to take away that autonomy is immoral, because government is an expression of autonomy itself. Thus, the only way to determine the morality of a government policy is to use the criterion of respecting autonomy. Robert Nozick writes in his book, Anarchy, State, and Utopia, that only a being with the capacity to so shape his life can have or strive for meaningful life. For example, in war, people choose to give their lives in order to fight oppression, which shows how autonomy makes life worth living. Secondly, autonomy is important because people are separate and have distinct intrinsic value. Nozick continues, to use a person in this way does not sufficiently respect and take account of the fact that he is a separate person, that his is the only life he has. He does not get some overbalancing good from his sacrifice, and no one is entitled to force this upon him, least of all a state of government that claims his allegiance, and that therefore must be neutral between its citizens. The moral side constraints upon what we may do reflect the fact of our separate existences. They reflect the fact that no moral balancing act can take place among us. There is no moral outweighing of one of our lives by another, so as to lead to a greater overall social good. Since each person is an individual, one cannot be sacrificed for another because such a sacrifice would fundamentally disrespect his identity. The rights to free speech, religion, and voting are just a few basic expressions of autonomy. Moral side constraints also apply to economics because money is the fruit of one's labor. Just as surely as taking away the right to vote violates autonomy, by taking a man's property, you deny him autonomy also. To take money is to take labor. To take labor is slavery. A minimal state operates so that no policy violates a person's autonomy. This is the sole burden of the state. I contend, first, that single-payer healthcare system violates individuals' autonomy. My first subpoint is that a single-payer system requires unjust taxation. A single-payer system requires redistribution. In order to provide for the system, heavier taxes must be instated on the wealthier citizens. If money were not going to be redistributed, then we wouldn't need a government system to pay for care. By forcing a person to pay for care they won't receive, the government becomes more than a minimal state, and is no longer an expression of the citizens' autonomy. Unjust taxation converts labor to forced labor, and is therefore immoral. My second subpoint is single-payer healthcare changes the nature of relationship between autonomous individuals. When one citizen is forced to take financial interest in the actions of another, the nature of their relationship is changed. One example of this is taxpayer-funded abortion. By forcing a pro-life person to pay for an abortion, the government would violate the first expression of autonomy, freedom of religion. Another potential violation arises when people engage in risky behavior because they know their medical expenses will be covered. If this happens, laws may be enacted to prevent such conduct and protect the financial interests of the state. When the tax-paying citizen enacts laws to prevent action by other autonomous citizens in order to protect his financial interests, this is a modern form of slavery and thus immoral. My third subpoint states that a single-payer system denies appropriate compensation to medical professionals. Not allowing physicians to control standards of care violate their autonomy as medical professionals. LayPage writes, another disturbing aspect of a single-payer system is the lack of competition among payers, which would reduce the physician's control over standards of care and reimbursement. In a pure single-payer system, doctors can only contract with the other payer available. Currently, in the U.S., physicians have some choice of insurers to work with, and even in Medicare or Medicaid, doctors can opt out. But they couldn't do so in a pure single-payer system. This is alarming because medical professionals would not have the ability to set the standards for quality of care or reimbursement, which violates their autonomy professionally and also means that they are not paid for their labor because of a lack of competition. I'd like to move on to my opponent's case. My opponent states that justice is fairness is the best way to measure morality. However, I digress. He says that the first equal liberty principle, the principle of morality, that everyone has basic liberties incompatible with other persons' liberties. However, I would propose that the right to property is a liberty that must be protected, and the right to property is only understood by, or the right to property is protected by respecting the right to autonomy. And autonomy is so fundamental because it is the one thing that makes humans human. He hasn't really given anything to me that would make me want to preserve fairness over autonomy. And here's why. Whenever I think about criminals, yes, he gave his speech about the disadvantages that they're born with, but many criminals come from disadvantaged backgrounds. So would it make sense to not allow a criminal to have the same amount of, or he's advocating fairness for all criminals. However, I wouldn't say that, I screwed up. Okay, I'm just gonna, what did I say? Okay, it comes down to a basic measure of looking at justice and how far a government can go to preserve the rights of its citizens. I offer you a plan that advocates a minimal state, a state that doesn't infringe upon any of its citizens' rights proactively. However, by voting for a single-payer healthcare system, what you are doing as a judge is you are saying that it is okay to value one person over another person. You see, Nozick says that people are individual people. They have their own rights, and so it is immoral for their autonomy to not be respected. But by voting for a single-payer system, you say that the overall social good, and that the overall social good is more important to uphold than the individual's autonomy. I don't really know what else to say. Okay.